you know what I'm about.
À-bas-le-ciel.
It's, the veganism, in a lot of ways attracts some of the most, deranged and, lost people in society, you know what I mean?
And these people who just want to fucking bring me down,
À-bas-le-ciel.
those people, they don't have any purpose in life. They're struggling. They're empty souls.
I feel like even for me, and we said this in the last video, I was looking, at the time that I found, YouTube and veganism on YouTube, I was looking for something bigger, a higher power, something to be a part of, And I might be one of the most lost souls on the YouTube here.
They're empty souls.
They're empty souls.
À-bas-le-ciel.
This is what Freelee and Durianrider do every day.
The secret life of Freelee.
You just walk in their house, it's just like them ranting to each other.
I remember it was not too long ago that Durianrider and the illustrious Julia Bohr were both claiming that somehow I was in a sexual triangle with you and Julia. That at the same time I was trying to seduce you in Scotland and Julia in Chiang Mai, and they were constantly including you in the category of underage girls. So the amount of imagination involved here is one, that you're supposed to be, I don't even know how young, 15? I don't know.
I know, 10 years younger than I actually am. But the thing is, just thinking about it now, it's so absurd and just ridiculous.
Right. Well, the other thing is, most men kind of have a type. If there are some men who would want to pursue Julia Bohr in her current state, there are some men for whom that's what they're looking for. And there are some men who would prefer an extremely slim woman like yourself. At the time, you had only recently, I think, been, gotten out of the hospital and so on. You were really in recovery. So the main thing you're working on. But so the idea that I'm seducing two women of such dramatically different descriptions on two continents.
I know. And trying to get us all to come together in Chiang Mai and meet. Oh my god.
And that I could be sent to prison for this. If there was a guy doing that, if there was a guy trying to seduce you in Scotland, I don't know, maybe he'd be a nice guy. Is that really a criminal act?
I know. Oh my god. It's totally not. And just the thought of it is just so ridiculous. And the fact is, even when I spoke to Durianrider, there was nothing to even suggest that. He just came out with it himself. He made it all up in his mind, which just shows his mind, doesn't it? It just shows what his thinking is all about.
Yeah.
Because even Julia herself didn't think anything of that kind of nature, and neither did I.
That's
so it was
true.
All conjured up by Harley.
That's true, but at one point I remember Julia was kind of elaborating a story on her blog that I was this mystery man who was seducing a tremendous number of women in Chiang Mai. She invented a kind of fantasy life for me.
That is true.
But she did not fancy herself as being the main object of my desire in those fantasies. I was apparently just trying to get as many women as possible. So, this reflects the creative potential of Julia as an author one day. I hope she goes on to become a romance novelist.
Oh God, I know. No, she won't. Julia won't, because someone told me to go and check out her Tumblr today about some things that she'd said about me, right? So I went. But one of the things that she's posted today, one of her last asks, I'll just read it out to you. Someone asked her, "Hi Julia, what are your plans after high school? Do you plan to attend uni?" And one sentence, "No uni, move to Thailand or Romania and train." So that is her plans for the future, basically. Which is sad. It's really, really sad, but
it is. I've actually seen her once. I don't read her Tumblr regularly. I was only reading it back when I was directly having to respond to it. But I have seen her refer to her future plans as being modeling of some kind. And then people wrote into her and said, "Look, you're delusional. Do you really think you can be a model?" And, she did have some answers. Her answers were not completely stupid. She said, well, basically she was talking about living the same kind of life that Freelee lives, which is not, Freelee's not a model per se. She's not paid by a modeling agency. But yeah, we're all allowed to dream, all right. It's ironic. Obviously, I don't want this whole conversation to be about Julia, but one day I was going to the gym here. I have a very nice gym. The video I uploaded today actually shows you my gym for a couple of seconds, and I thought, you know what? The greatest irony is that probably, like, if I was talking to Julia's parents, I would say, you know what you can do with Julia? You could actually send her to Kunming, the city I'm living in China. She could actually become a student at my school where I'm learning Chinese, and she could work out at this gym every day. And like, obviously, it would be the worst scandal in the world if I actually invited Julia here to join me. But with this school, we have most of the students are old. Like, some of them are over 60. Most of them are middle-aged people. But we do actually have like 15-year-old, 16-year-old students here also who are taken care of. The school, they kind of treat them differently, obviously. They don't have quite the same rights and freedoms that I do. And there are parents who send their kids here at 15 and 16 to study Chinese without a parent, which surprised me, but they do. Mm-hmm. So I just say, if it is an irony of ironies that actually I could recommend that Julia live exactly my lifestyle, and she'd lose weight too. She'd work out at the gym here. She could get in shape. Yeah. Anyway.
But, then that would be a scandal, of course, you inviting her there. Could you imagine the speculation that people would come up with?
Right. It's a shame. I remember too, she got not even hate mail, but just like puzzled mail. Like, I remember people writing into her and asking, like, why do you think Eisel is attracted to you? Like, you're not smart or interesting. Why do you think he wants you?
Oh man, people on the internet, oh my god. So the school that you're working at, how is that, like, the international people come there to learn Chinese? Is that what it is?
Well, so that was I used to live in Scotland. I used to have a Scottish accent. I can tell you about that in a second. But even there, you managed to trick me, because you said this school you're working at. I thought you said this girl you're working at. I thought it was this girl you're working at. So even though I was in Glasgow. I don't know if I mentioned it. Probably did somewhere. But I was in Glasgow when I was I think 12, turning 13. I think during that year and a half. And during that time, I actually had by the end of it, I had a perfect Scottish accent, and people did not believe I was Canadian anymore because I managed to blend in. But anyway, so I remember practicing some of the small vowel changes, like consistently the word fish was instead fesh. Just some of the changes like that. But I did get used to it. Anyway, so you were asking about the school I'm at, not the girl I'm at, right? Yeah, which should also be a good question. Cool. Yeah, this school, I'll say it's actually the most positive experience I've had in organized education of any kind. In some ways, like, it's really grotty. Like, just my conditions are not luxurious. There's construction noise outside the window right now. There are mosquitoes. Just the actual bathrooms and plumbing and that kind of thing are not impressive. But the core educational experience of sitting down with a teacher for 4 hours a day, every day, and working on the language is better than anything I've seen at any university, or of course any high school or anything else I've ever had. It's better than anything I've seen myself in a Buddhist monastery. And in some ways, as I've said, my life here is in some ways has some of the ideal elements of being in a Buddhist monastery, and in some ways ideal elements of signing up for the military or what have you, which have been other kind of possibilities in my life. But it is just a private, for-profit school. It's not, the government doesn't give it any money. It's not part of a university. Some people decided to get involved. They named it after your Scottish poet. It's named after Keats. Keats was Scottish, wasn't he? He could be English. Yeah, Keats. So this is the Keats school, believe it or not. So we have not read any poetry of Keats in Chinese translation yet. But and I've actually asked them if they can sell me like a T-shirt that says Keats, because that's the name. It says Keats in English, and then it says Keats in Chinese. That's it. It's like, yeah, man, I'm into Scottish poetry and Chinese translation. But they have, the government here, they do translate all that stuff. Anyone who's considered a genius must be officially translated in Chinese. So I'm sure there are very good translations of Keats into Chinese for me to study when I reach that level. But yeah, so it's in some ways a really humble setup, and in some ways, just for me personally, I really dig it. And I'm now assuming I'm going to stay until December, which most people here regard as insane. Because most people, if they live like this for 2 weeks, they start going crazy. You know, they want to have a more luxurious lifestyle, or what, you know, not even luxurious. They just want to do their own thing. They want to be able to walk around naked or something. You know, in your own apartment. In your own apartment, you can walk around naked. You know what I mean? You kind of, in that sense here, you never really relax.
We want to live the permanent vacation lifestyle.
Oh, it's Lauren. It's such an irony. I don't think I've told you this. I've told a few people, but my parents actually like asked me if I wanted to do that. Like just a couple weeks ago, they were like, "Oh, well, like seeing as your job in China didn't work out, do you want to just take a year off and like live in Thailand?" And like, and they actually said to me, and they're like, you know, like your income from Patreon is probably enough, and we can help you out. Like, you know, they'd help me out if I had a problem or needed an airplane ticket or something. And it was like this is the opposite of everything I believe in.
Everything that you stand for, that is just the opposite. I can just imagine you bringing out a video and saying to people, "Yeah, so my parents have, just kind of offered me to like kind of like like pay for me and everything. So I'm just going to take a year out in Thailand." I could just imagine that video. That would be.
And I'm gonna move in next door to Vegan Ava and Joe Best.
No way.
You know, the other irony is though that I do speak Thai. I was just there speaking Thai. I speak Thai better than I speak Chinese now. So like in a lot of ways, life in Thailand is more easy for me and interesting. And it is like a weird what if question in my life. Like I'm glad I got divorced. I don't regret my divorce. That's why I talk about it openly. But you know, my wife and I, just before we got divorced, we moved to Taiwan together. We were in Taiwan for a couple of months and then we finally split up. But another option at that time, if I'd wanted it, I could have then, you know, moved to Thailand and taken a year off. And then, like now, I didn't really think about it because I don't want to relax. I don't want to be on vacation. You know, I want to be. I've got ambitions, even though my ambitions are really not about earning money. You know, they're doing other things. Anyway, look, I don't need to ask that question if it's uncomfortable. But I was just wondering because I heard you and Sheeta talking about it. And I was just wondering, you know, your own status as someone who is diagnosed anorexia and talk about anorexia. Obviously, I see that as a totally positive thing on your YouTube channel and in your digital life. But I just wondered, how does that actually play out at a gym or in the personal trainer side of your life? Or is it just never mentioned? Is it just not talked about?
It's not really talked about. I mean, because I'm like one of the people who, although I'm thin, I'm small and I'm petite, and like people will notice that I'm thin, but like I'm kind of like I've got muscle and I look like kind of gymnasticy thin. So kind of like physically it's not much of an issue, but psychologically for me sometimes it can be quite difficult, if you know what I mean, because a lot of my clients are just, you know, everyone was just so obsessed with like getting abs and losing this bit of fat and everything, so psychologically it can be quite difficult.
I knew one girl, just about the time I started university, she was diagnosed with anorexia and she was hospitalized. So I do not know how extreme she was. When I knew her, she had no physical signs of it, but she had been put in a hospital for a little while. And both before and after she was in the hospital, her job was working at a store that was called the Weight Loss Shop, where her full-time job was selling like, you know, miracle weight loss powders and shit, you know, like whatever, green tea powder, whatever. So it was like, you know, and I mean, I guess the only thing that maybe made that easier, I think her clients were almost entirely elderly women. They were like women over 60, but still it was like, well, so like every week you talk to a therapist for several hours about how all the weight loss stuff is bullshit, and then you go into a shop and sell exactly that bullshit to your clients.
Exactly. I mean, me, I've never been like I've always kind of promoted health. I've never I mean, I'll get companies like Herbalife and weight loss pills and all this contacting me saying, yeah, would you like to team up with us? And I'm just like, no, because I wouldn't sell something that I don't believe in anyway. But you know, the thing is, like, the personal training, I did kind of get into it, I suppose. I mean, I've been an athlete my whole life. I've always been involved in sports and I've always been interested in it, you know, so it's a big passion for me. But then I guess it, like, being a runner and things, then, you know, like the anorexia just kind of got even worse, and and things. So it's not like I just became a personal trainer and just became interested in sport with my eating disorder. But you know, I'm more interested in now helping people to like healthy mindset and healthy body. I'm not into the crappy weight loss beach body stuff and everything. So it's difficult. And
I wanted to directly respond to something you said a minute ago, and it relates to everything. It relates to Durianrider, it relates to China, it relates to Scotland even. But you know, the contrast, you were saying that you've always been an athlete, you've always been involved in sport. I can say the opposite. I have never been an athlete. I've never been involved with sport. Even when I was doing the long distance cycling, for me it wasn't sport. It was always just about being prepared for physical violence, you know. And you know, again, like honestly, Scotland was part of that. When I was in Glasgow, it's a long time ago, Glasgow's a different town, but Glasgow was really a very two-fisted fighting town. And, you know, the Catholics would beat up the Protestants and the Protestants would beat up the Catholics. Just this very, you know, miscellaneous violence to Glasgow at that time. And, you know, again, I think you probably get this impression from the channel, like, I'm not someone who goes out seeking violence by any means. But, like, here, you know, my Chinese teachers, again, we're talking in Chinese, but really simple sentences. And they ask me things like, oh, so why do you go to the gym? Like, what sport do you play? And I tell them, honestly, in Chinese, like, one of my answers was, like, I don't play any sport. Like, I exercise to be ready for violence. Like, you know, because that's, like, I can't say it in a more sophisticated way in Chinese. But that's, you know, that really has been the reality of my life, whether I was working at a gym or times when I really didn't have access to a gym and had to come up with other creative ways to do it. And, you know, it's funny the ways people pick up on it. A new student who just arrived here, and I do have to physically sit and talk with these people, even if I don't like them. But anyway, they're not all terrible, but some of them are pretty terrible. But one guy sat down. He's about the same age as me, maybe a couple years younger. A nice-looking white American guy, blonde, wears glasses. He just doesn't look tough. He looks like a nice guy. And he was telling me about all the harassment he gets on the streets here. Like, just, like, adult men, like, harassing him. And, like one example, like, he was walking in the street, and some guys who all seemed to be on the same team, like, maybe they were a rugby team, like Chinese guys on a rugby team or something, just started shouting at him in English, like, fuck you, fuck yourself. Like, they were just shouting the only insults they knew in English, which was not very good. And, you know, like, seeing how he would react. And I just sat there and I said to him, like, it's amazing, because, like, let me tell you, like, I don't think I'm the toughest guy on the block, but literally nobody here even looks at me funny. Like, nobody starts anything with me. Yeah. And it was just amazing to sit down next to a guy. He'd only been here for a couple days, and he already had this amazing experience with people kind of taking a poke at him on the street. And, you know, so from Glasgow to Kunming, it's just, you know, that's also a sense in which it shapes my life, is just all the problems you don't have and all the things you don't get into. And that's, you know, so, and you know, that obviously that side of my character was really brought to the forefront with the Durianrider thing in Chiang Mai in a way that I never thought it would be. Because, I mean, you know, my life is boring.
I know, like, that's what, when I was watching your videos, I was just like, because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, when I was following Durianrider and then I first heard about you and all the things that he said about you, this was before the thing that I got involved with. Right. I mean, I knew nothing about you, but the way that he, like, painted this picture of you, I thought you were this criminal, this CIA guy, this absolutely horrible, like, this crazy, I don't know, gangster guy, and that's what, like, he makes you, like, seem like. And then I was watching your videos more recently, and you're sitting there laughing like, yeah, my life is boring, and you're sitting in this, like, little room where in China and stuff, and I'm like, I'm so embarrassed that I actually believed Durianrider, you know. And actually, when you actually see what your life is compared to what like Durianrider was painting it to be, and all these images in my head and all this fantasy, you know, so it's so crazy.
And the flip side of that, the other side of the coin is, I think there are always things we believe about Durianrider, and, like, you forget that you believe them until something reminds you of them or challenges them. Like, to give you an example, like, years ago, he probably still says, but I can remember Durianrider saying that he has, like, a lot of friends on the African Olympic teams, like Olympic athletes from Kenya. Like, oh yeah, like he would say like, oh yeah, I've trained with those guys. Like those guys are friends of mine. And then like something reminds you of it, whatever, a year later or something, you're thinking, has Durianrider ever actually talked to anyone on the Kenyan Olympic running team? Like, like they haven't appeared on the show. Like it's not even something I'd like really questioned. Like, I don't know, why not? Why wouldn't he be friends with some Olympic athletes from Kenya? And then you realize like he lies about everything else, including like just lying that he has friends who are going to beat me up. Like that too, like it's a really weird thing when you're actually there in Chiang Mai. It just blows my mind that someone would lie about that. And the reality is he doesn't have those friends. He's alone. And like one of the reasons why he spends so much time with Julia Bohr is because he really is alone. He neither has the friends from the Kenyan Olympic team, nor does he have the kind of tough guy friends he's sort of bragging about,
And that, I think that became so obvious recently because, like, obviously what he done to you and like basically the real Durianrider being exposed to us all. People who were his friends, such as Vegan Gains, and or people who looked up to him or at least kissed his ass in some cases. Well, you've got Vegan Gains, Light Twins. People just were like, this is not on, and so they don't turn against them, but they don't like go with the flow with them, and he sees that as backstabbing. So now, like, obviously, then he didn't like that, so then he writes them off. They are no longer his friends, okay? And then now all these videos are on, hey, look at the up and coming channels and the Roto 4 movement, and it's all these, like, he done a video on it, and I think I've taken parts of it just laughing at it. So you've got Vegan Ava, you've got Julia Bohr, you've got all these like other weird, like,
Pau Simeon, right? Pau Simeon I think is there too, right?
Yeah, and it's like and Pau Simeon and stuff, and it's like he's like getting, these are all my new friends, and it's like that's what it's like. Do you know what I mean? He's got no friends, so now he's like getting all these new people in and kind of training them up in the Roto 4 way so that they won't backstab him. That's what I see it as anyway, and I don't know if you do, but that's what it really seems like.
I agree with you, and I'm going to be self-critical in this agreement because many people think this is something I have in common with Durianrider, and it is actually different. Like many people, so I think the root of that for Durianrider is paranoia. And like the word paranoia is funny because we kind of use it too often, but we don't use it very seriously. Like we say that kind of characters on a TV show are paranoid. But like exactly what you just described with Durianrider, the reason why, like, there's no reason why he shouldn't be friends with Vegan Gains still today. Like I know both directly and indirectly, like Vegan Gains wanted to remain his friend, but he needed Durianrider to kind of just be reasonable. For Durianrider to say, oh, look, I fucked up, I'm sorry. For Durianrider to kind of modify his behavior in a friendly way, which Durianrider can't do. So to me, it's fundamentally a paranoid behavior for him, that either you're 100% his supporter or you're his enemy because he suspects you. He's suspicious. He thinks you're plotting. He thinks you're trying to destroy him. That's the way he treats Vegan Gains even, or these other people. Now, I just say people think that about me because I called a natural vegan an idiot and this kind of thing. Well, I called something she said stupid. I didn't even call her stupid, but whatever. And I really do understand why people say that about me, because they think I'm playing a similar game to Durianrider, and in a sense, it's not even insulting to me. But as it happens, psychologically, it's not true. I'm really not paranoid. And on the other hand, I find it very hard to even be embittered towards people. I really do feel a kind of love for my fellow vegans, which, even the people who are idiots, even the people who, I really feel like if only they could put the pieces of the puzzle together in a different way. There's so much we have in common. We want the same goals. I actually do feel a kind of brotherly love and even affection for some of these people who are totally despicable. Like Vegan Ava. I mean, Vegan Ava is a joke, but I don't hate her. I'm not mad. You know what I mean? And I find it hard. I find it hard to be mad at Durianrider. I'll just say that. But anyway, go on. Yeah. What do you say?
No, I was going to say, like, I get people think that about you because I honestly, the people that say that about you, I think they honestly don't watch your videos.
Yeah.
They just click on your videos and hate you, like, without even watching them. Because, I mean, everything that you've just said there, you like, explain that on one of your recent videos about tolerance and things, and, you know, that's exactly what you've said there. And on the actual vegan, obviously there was things that you disagreed with on, and that's completely fine. This is mature. We're not all going to agree with each other. You just made your video, was it yesterday, I think, about saying that there's something, like the thing that you don't agree with Cheetah on, but big wow, we don't need to agree on everything, you know, but then people like Durianrider just think that you have to agree 100%. And like you were saying with Vegan Ava there, and oh yeah, I'll give you another example about Julia Bohr. She, when obviously I came out and I said, look, in my video, I was like, I can't support Durianrider anymore and everything. And then right away, she completely defriended me. And on her Tumblr, she was saying, backstabbing bitch and all this. And I was like, oh my God, just because but then I've written her things, and I wrote on my Tumblr saying, because people were asking, and I was saying, look, Julia can follow Durianrider if she wants. I hope she does kind of open her mind a little bit, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're still friends. But then she completely wrote me off just because I did not support Daddy Durianrider, you know. So that's the difference. But people need to, I think if people grow up, then, you know, well, hopefully people will grow up, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, you know, I really do feel like what happened to me in Chiang Mai, it's not because it's me, not because of my ego, but because I was this kind of canary in the coal mine. I think it is a turning point for digital veganism, maybe for veganism in general. And like everything that's happening in Chiang Mai, it's not that dangerous if people can laugh at it, you know? But like you yourself have been through exactly that transition. There was a time when you took like the Chiang Mai scene deadly serious, when it was serious to you. And then at a certain point, it just becomes a joke, you know, and it kind of loses all power of you. But on a bigger scale, I think it's happened to tons of people. And it's something I never could have done intentionally. I just kind of happened to be there. I happened to be one of the people it was focused on. But, you know, like, everyone is laughing about it now. And, you know, channels like Joe Vegan and Vegan Cheetah, they obviously show that off. But I'd like to think that the danger, like the cult-like danger, has really been averted for the long term, because we've taken something that used to be so powerful and we've exposed it for what it was. And now people can laugh about it, which is great too, right?
Yeah, I think that you're right about the danger of it and things, and like I was saying when I was on with Cheetah the other day, we watch Durianrider and Vegan Ava now because for the comedy aspect of it, because I think most people see them as freaks, and we can't actually believe that some of the stuff that we're saying, as sad as that is, I think that's the truth. But there's something as well with Durianrider and the Rotto 4 thing, which I know you're saying like it's not so dangerous anymore, but I think for some people it can be dangerous, because it seems to be that the people that are attracted to that, that kind of, we'll call it the cult anyway, because I can't think of a better name for it, but and I'm speaking from my own experience here, and obviously Cheetah's been there as well, it's people who either are very young, like Julia Bohr, young and influential, or people who come from a kind of background of either mental illness or addiction or something, and are really in a place where they're lost in their lives. It's the same thing that other cults do that are not like Rotto 4, you know, and vulnerable people get drawn into this, because you feel, personally, from personal experience, when you're fighting an eating disorder or a mental illness, it can be a very lonely fight. And you look for people and you find something and they're welcoming, and it's hard to explain, but you're really attracted to that. And I think for some, I mean, when you look at the people that actually follow Rotto 4 now, I mean, they either are really young or they just don't seem mentally all there.
Well, look, I agree with everything you just said, and that is a small number of people for whom it really is a cult. I agree. Like, but the total number of people that, I don't know if it's 50 people, I don't know if it's 100 people, but like really it could be fewer than 50 people. But there definitely are some people, like including Vegan Ava, in my opinion, for whom that has that cult-like intensity. And I got to meet several of them face to face in Chiang Mai. Actually, okay, one I can mention by name, Momo. She appeared on my channel recently. She's an Asian girl, but she speaks English fluently. So she was in the video showing how lame the Chiang Mai festival is while I was talking about it, while I was narrating it. But, Momo, when I met her in Chiang Mai, she said hi to me in like one word. She saw me. She knew exactly who I was and knew the significance of my being there. And, she then saw Leah. So you've probably seen the video with Leah on my channel.
Yeah, I'm friends with Leah, actually, yeah.
Okay, cool. So you know each other, cool. But, so Leah is now like 20 years old, but she dropped out of high school. Like that, it's pretty cult-like, her whole experience, even though she doesn't talk about it that way. She talks about it in a very relaxed way, which is cool, but still, it's pretty messed up. And among other things, like this whole cult ultimately is about weight loss and fitness. And Leah gained a ton of weight, whatever it was. I forget, 30 kilograms. Well, she gained a lot of weight. And just nobody ever mentions it, because like they can't lose faith in the unlimited calories, balance your fucking, glycogen stores, all this bullshit that Durianrider's been preaching for so long. They have to believe in it. So if someone's gaining fat, you either ignore it or you justify it the same way Julia Bohr does. But like, it was just, even though not a lot was said, like Momo was there, she looked at me with this steely gaze, and then she walked over and gave Leah a hug and a smile and looked at Leah and then moved away from her. And it was like, you could see, I mean, now I do not know, maybe Momo's gotten it out of her system. Maybe a month in the cult was enough for her. But like in those few moments of her interaction with me and Leah, like she knew, like Leah was an outcast. Leah had been kicked out of the cult. And like to say anything to Leah was dangerous. You know what I mean? You could not be friends with Leah anymore. It really was cult-like. And just the look in her eyes and the fear and everything else. And of course, Leah wasn't like that. Leah's just totally relaxed and doesn't give a fuck. That's what Leah's like, I think, all the time anyway. But she's kind of ignoring all this kind of tension in the air. And, I'm certain for Hannah Chloe, I'm certain for Hannah it would have been exactly the same, but even worse, because there was the sexual component, where it's just like, no, like Durianrider and or Freelee have declared you no longer human. Nobody can talk to you. And most we can kind of silently smile. So yeah, that part of it is real, but for a small number of people, yeah.
It's a shame because like veganism really shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't be about this segregation. I mean, there's enough of that. But unfortunately, it just seems to be that's kind of what they're creating, and it's becoming even more so because I don't know if you've seen the criteria to actually qualify for the Bike Fest next year. Next year, you have to, it's a certain amount of miles and stuff on Strava, but you've also got to have your own Roto4 YouTube channel and everything. I mean, so they're like segregating it even more, and it's just, I mean, fair enough if that's something that you want to do, but it's the fact that they're doing this in the name of activism, in the name of veganism, and it's not.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, look, and those guys, the ones I've met, they are a bunch of losers. I mean, I'm sorry. The guys who actually do that, who follow Durianrider's commands. And one of them just confessed to me. He was like, oh, well, like before Durianrider forced us to do this. Because, like, he wasn't allowed to attend the festival if he didn't have a bike and a Strava account, blah, blah, blah. He mentioned, he was like, oh, like I was into other sports. And he mentioned what the sports were. I'll just leave it anonymous. But it was like, the guy is pathetic anyway. But it's like, that too. It's like, okay, so you bought a bicycle and you started kind of living a lie, even though, and it's not that he has no athleticism, he has some other sport he'd rather be doing, seeing part of this. But I think, when you get away from the hardcore cult members, on a larger scale, I think what they really exploited was the loneliness of being vegan. Like you mentioned, loneliness is driving the cult members. Yeah, that's true. But the softcore followers, I think they're mostly people who just feel so alone. Even if you still love your family, You feel alienated from your family. Like I don't give a shit about the other students here at this school, but they literally eat pieces of dead cow and yogurt and shit in front of me every day. I generally don't sit and eat with them at all. Look, maybe I'm an asshole anyway, and it's irrelevant. But it's true. Your ability to form relationships with your fellow man, whether it's students at your school, coworkers, whatever. I just do think all over the world, people who are not psychologically weak, who are not susceptible to the cult-like aspects, still that loneliness and wanting to belong to something. I think that was very, very powerful in drawing people in. And then it was combined with images of, the beach, of just basically an escapist fantasy. So I think a much larger number of people were participating in on that level. And I guess loneliness fundamentally was what was being preyed upon there.
Oh, definitely. And I still feel like this kind of I don't feel it so much anymore because I don't know, my YouTube channel seems to have grown and I'm connecting with so many people now, and it's amazing. Like I feel so less lonely, even although it's digital, but I do have people like in Glasgow or in Scotland and things, and in England and stuff, and I'll do some meetups and things soon. But the fact is, even this weekend, for example, my mum was like, are you coming? She always says, "You coming home to my parents' house?" And I was like, I've got stuff to do. But do you know it was that way because I just didn't even really want to go, because like you say, they just sit and eat pieces of dead cow in front of you and dairy, and they don't care. And if you try and bring up anything about veganism or anything about ethics, it's like, Lauren, they just blank me. And so I don't even want to go home sometimes and see them because of this reason. So
well, as you know, I've commented that for me it's like I'm alienated all three ways. Like I'm not part of the meat culture, I'm not part of the alcohol culture, and I'm also not part of the drug culture. Like I don't use marijuana, don't use alcohol, don't use meat, and so much of socialization in both United Kingdom and in Canada, it's really based on those things. I was going to ask you, I'll just mention my own experience really briefly, but I assume you have things like this too. But, in terms of dealing with medical doctors, that can also be a really kind of painful form of alienation. Medical doctors who regard you as insane or unhealthy because you're vegan. When my daughter was born, that was part of the huge tension, was that there were people inside the hospital who had power over us, doctors and nurses and what have you, who treated us like shit because we were vegan. And, they kept asking questions like, oh, so you guys are Scientologists, right? Scientology is this freak new religion in the United States. It's
Tom Cruise.
It's like, no. And I noticed that one, they were all, again, in terms of my physically intimidating aspect, they would always wait to bully my wife when I was not in the room and shit about that kind of stuff. And it was like, she'd have to say to them, why would you, Scientology has nothing to do with veganism, you know what I mean? But that kind of shit, it just reflected, the extreme contempt the doctors had, and their assumption that we were opposed to modern medical science, despite all the evidence to the contrary. In terms of the questions we asked and everything else, we're very pro-science. It was really awful, and there were many other things about the hospital experience that were bad. But I know it sounds ridiculous to talk about prejudice against vegans, but in a medical context, you can deal with doctors who are, to say the least, prejudiced against you, are really hostile towards you because you're vegan.
Well, it's actually worse when your medical condition is an eating disorder anyway. You can imagine how bad that is, because then they just think that it is another eating disorder, or you need dairy, you need the calcium and dairy for your bones, and then they'll give you all these studies which show that eating meat and dairy is good, and then I'm like, yeah, but all these studies are funded by the meat and dairy industry, and so it's difficult. But at the end of the day, it's our lives, and it's like you say, you've just got to get on and just deal with that prejudice, I suppose. But hopefully, I know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to lessen that prejudice. I mean, hopefully it will happen soon. But well, I can't see it. But you know what I mean. It would be nice to even have some sort of impact on it.
But that is interesting. But I mean, that you in Scotland, you do actually have, in a sense, those kinds of debates with doctors. They actually talk to you about that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty mad. So.
No, it's interesting. I mean, like in France, the kind of hostility dealt with, like the doctors, they would not have a discussion with you, which is fine because I didn't want to waste my time anyway. But it would just be stuff like the doctors would say things like and for whatever reason, they like assume me and my ex-wife were like high school dropouts from a third world country, which is also like really they assume this, and they were like, yes, well, you think you know what you're talking about, but I'm a medical doctor, and like you, for example, like what education do you have? Like, you know, like this is like really like this is so like they're not addressing veganism, they're addressing whether or not you have the right to have an opinion. And like my ex-wife would say, I have a PhD from Cambridge University. and they would say shit like, well, here in France you have to conform to our system. So again, this is not addressing veganism directly, but it's indirectly. You have to conform to our system. After all, how do they do things in your country? They would say this to me. It'd be like, I'm from Toronto, Canada, where it's like, I don't know, but really they were always just insulting us this way. Like, we're vegans, therefore we come from a third world country. Anyway, and this is at a major hospital in France, but never once did I have a conversation of the type you're describing where like studies or facts were involved. It was just bullying, you know what I mean, on the doctor's part. Anyway, we can change the subject, but I just wanted to raise that because I thought probably you did have experience that kind, and evidently you do. At some point, I think you probably should make a video about that, because, you know, talking to your doctor about veganism or just dealing with your doctor when you are a vegan, that probably is something a lot of people have to think about or reflect on, you know.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Actually, I will do a video on that soon. That is a good idea. So, right, well, we went a wee bit off track there, didn't we? What were we talking about?
Did you have something you wanted to press me on? Did you have a list of issues you wanted to confront me with? I don't know, Lauren. I'm just here to get to know you.
Confront you with? No, I just really, I mean, obviously I'd like to talk to you again and stuff, but it was just like, I think it was just probably about time that we actually did speak, you know, because we've been through quite a lot. I mean, you know what I mean? But we hadn't actually spoken, which, so it's nice, like, obviously, just to speak to you this once. But I was just wanted to say that, I mean, I became vegan just in January this year, and the main reason that I became vegan was for ethical reasons. Not that I even knew anything about I didn't know anything about veganism, but it was through doing some yoga, and also, you know how yoga's kind of intertwined with sort of Buddhist philosophy, and I'm not even going to talk to you about Buddhist philosophy because I don't even know much about it, and I know you do. However, you know, that it was all this kind of the ahimsa and non-harming, and the more I read about it, the more I was like, you know, I can't. And I studied earth science at university for a bit, and I was like, I'm really into environmental issues, and then I was like, I can't call myself an environmentalist or an animal lover, and I'm still eating this and I'm living this unethical lifestyle. But I was scared to go vegan because of my eating disorder, and I thought that veganism was this weird eating disorder thing. But then I looked a wee bit more into it, and I was like, you know, I can't live like this anymore. So I just overnight I went vegan, and then since then, you know, I went online to kind of search for things, and you know what happens when you Google vegan, you get a banana girl in front of you, and so that was kind of obviously the path that I went down. But you know, just in the last month since I've found your content, that's opening my eyes to a lot of things. That's opened my eyes to issues that have never even crossed my mind before. Even the thing like the pet ownership, I'd never even thought about that as being
Right.
You know, it's just something that's so natural. Everyone's got a body dog or a cat, pretty much. So I hadn't even thought about these things, and now it's like your content is just making me think and seeing the world in a whole different light, and that's what I really needed. Not just to help me be a better person, a better vegan, but to help me actually recover and pursue recovery. Because when you've got an eating disorder or any sort of illness or addiction, quite often you get stuck up in the poor me mentality. And what was your video the other day that you done? Oh God, what was it? You done a video that was quite something about suffering. What was it called?
The one on utilitarianism or the black and white issue? I don't know.
No, it was before that. It was about suffering and oh God. I'll try and find it online.
Okay. I can get the list of videos you like, but I could go on anyway. Something about something.
Yeah, so, and then that just spoke to me, and I was like, wow, that is like exactly how I've been, like kind of really just caught up in my own problems and my own issues and poor me. But then now that when you become vegan and you become aware of all the other issues that are going on in the world and a lot of the things that you bring up in your videos, it's like my problems are so insignificant compared to this. And now it's like every choice that I make is not just for me. You know, it's not all about me anymore. Yeah. In fact, it's hardly about me at all. I'm not the issue. The issue is making the world a better place, and you've got no idea how significant that is for someone who's recovering. It's a game changer. It really is a game changer for me, and I don't really know how to describe it or if it's even making any sense.
No, it does. Thank you. I mean, first of all, I can take a compliment. I mean, thank you very much. I mean, it's very flattering. I do appreciate what you said, and I think pardon me. I think I can understand it because I went through similar changes in perspective just much earlier in life, and I think what you say reminds me. A couple days ago, I got some hate mail from someone demanding to know from me, what is my message anyway? Obviously, there was a longer statement than that. But I remember just in response to that, I thought, for me, subjectively, I have no message. Like, I am just, like, for me, the ultimate message is no message. Like, I just come on camera and talk about my life. And it happens that I'm a really unusual character, and when I talk about my life, I talk for 20 minutes about, vegan politics and philosophy and this kind of stuff. But I do think that for the audience, like if I was going to say what is the message of my channel, it probably is just in a really simple sense, things don't have to be simple. It's okay for things to be complicated. And, it's okay for us to admit that we don't have all the answers. And it's okay for us to really think about these kinds of complexities and contradictions. Like I realize that sounds almost childish in its simplicity. But on a very fundamental level, it's not, because it's such a contrast to, for example, to saying, I can solve your eating disorder. Here's how. Here's a simple solution to a complicated problem. I can solve global warming. Here's how. It's a simple solution to a complicated problem. And there's a sense in which I also want to be idealistic. I want to indulge in those things. But the whole approach... Oh, I've got an echo happening. The whole approach I take is instead to say it's okay for things to be complicated. It's okay for us to, embrace and admit all the things that don't make sense or all the things we don't have answers to. But obviously, in having those conversations, it's wonderful that people like you are asking new questions and also, finding new answers. So that's great. My impression of you back when I first got to know you online, I just thought you were too smart for a lot of the bullshit you were involved in. And I was right. I won my bet. So your story has a happy ending for me,
No, honestly, I will take that as a compliment, but that is kind of exactly what has happened. And like I said, I said the reason how I kind of got involved in that, because I was in a very vulnerable place and just looking for something. But now that I'm kind of looking back in on that from the outside. I mean, I'm like, it just seems so ridiculous and like airhead, and I'm just like, I'm not like that. I'm one of the people that really needs to be. I really need. You always say that your channel is not veganism 101, and I don't need veganism 101. I just, when I get up in the morning or stuff, or if, see when I'm in, like, even making my dinner and stuff, I'll switch on now one of your videos, like, on my phone or something, just, and have that playing and me listening to it while I'm just doing stuff, and I'm like, this is brilliant. This is what I've been missing, this kind of intellectually stimulating stuff, as opposed to just ride your bike and eat bananas and, like, what I eat, so this is really, really helping. It's helping me on a personal level, and it's just helping me to understand veganism, and it'll help me hopefully to just kind of to do what I want to do, and like make a small change in the world, even if that is possible. So
I think, though, that is a difference. Say you started with ethical veganism, and I think that is really natural. You start with those ethical questions that are focused on yourself because they're about what you're going to do and what you're going to eat and how you're going to live, and then you look outward and figure out how does this fit into the rest of the world, whether or not that's trying to save the world, whether that's anything so grandiose. I remember I read an article years and years ago about a sort of religious cult group in Spain. And it was a Catholic group, but it was kind of a weird cult-like group within Catholicism. And the article was written because some significant political figures had become members of this group and so on. And I remember one of the things that a member said, I think he was an ex-member, so he was a member for a while. He said, the reality is with Catholicism, once they tell you, like, you've saved your soul and you're going to go to heaven after you die, there's nothing for you to do. It doesn't give you a mission in the world, doesn't give you anything. And that's why people want to get involved with this group, is because, it's not enough to just be told, oh, now you're one of the good people. Now you're one of the saved people who's going to go to heaven. People want to take on some more responsibility. I think, obviously I'm not saying this to flatter veganism. I think that's a really natural thing for people to want to take a next step. People to say, okay, I've accepted this fundamental principle that changes my life. How do all the other pieces fit together now? Because even if they don't change much, what the truth is, the other pieces do fit together a little bit differently. Whether that's your perspective on what you do at work, or your perspective on your pet dog, or these other questions of what is the future? Like for me, what is the future of Canada, or for you, what is the future of Scotland? I think all those things, even if it's only in a subtle way, they do change a bit once you've become an ethical vegan. Right.
And it's funny because a lot of people will be like, or claim to be ethical vegans, and I mean they are, but then like the case of Unnatural Vegan, for instance, so she'll say like she's ethical vegan, but then bring up one thing, like the pet ownership thing, that she obviously feels really strongly about, and she's not so willing to just listen to other perspectives on that, and she gets really wound up about it and quite defensive. Do you find that with quite a lot of people? And that you mentioned it actually in your video, was it the bullfight one, where you talk? Yeah, you said that you lived in the border between France and Spain, and that there were like the ethical vegans that you were talking to there. They were fine to talk about certain issues, but then the bullfighting issue, it was like they were not so interested in talking about that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so Unnatural Vegan, she started at the opposite extreme. She started as a raw food, crazy cult member who quit using fluoride, and, she lost most of her teeth. I forget, she says she got 14 cavities or something. But, she read a book that convinced her of a lot of the stupid bullshit Freelee and Durianrider still teach. That you should stop brushing your teeth, you should stop using soap and shampoo, and you should eat nothing but raw fruit and this kind of thing. So she started out at that end, and she became disillusioned with it. And then she built her channel on this image of herself as an ultra-rational proponent of science, which she isn't. That's not her background in university or professionally or otherwise. Now, my point here is not just to kind of denounce her as an idiot, even though I do kind of, especially after my recent experience there, I regard her as a person of both limited morality and limited intellect. You know, like some of the glaring examples of that, she actually claimed that a dog does not know that it has been castrated, a male dog. Despite the fact that, as I point out, dogs literally lick their own balls. And I have seen scientific studies looking at the fact that dogs are ravenous, but how could they not be? They can see and smell their own testicles and what have you. And, you know, her dismissing any view to the contrary as pseudoscience. In my conversation with her, I mean, this comes back to my background in Buddhism, she was really actively threatening to denounce me and defame me much more than she did in reference to my background in Buddhism. And so that was kind of an interesting and strange conversation, because I had to say to her, well, look, you know, I lost more than 10 years of my life being a scholar of Buddhism. And, like, you can Google it yourself, or here are some links. Like, you can see that I actually made a big impact in that field. And yeah, there are people who call me an asshole on the internet. Like, you can find Buddhist discussion forums where people say I'm a bad guy because they disagree with my views. But you can also see evidence that I had like a real impact on that field. I made a real contribution in terms of, you know, the lectures I delivered, the essays I published, and just the number of websites where they list, like a website that lists useful resources for that area of study, where they're listing a whole bunch of things with my name on it, you know. And I said to her straight up, have you ever done anything like that, Swayze? In any field? Like, do you know what that's like in the sciences or anything else, you know, to devote years of your life to something and become a specialist? And like, yes, some people respect you and some people hate you. So, I mean, it is kind of a weird thing, but Swayze, she's not really an ethical vegan. She didn't get into it through the ethical route. She's not really a scientist. She's not really interested in science. So she's kind of sitting on the fence of a few different issues. I mean, for me, the bottom line is I'm happy if anyone is actually earning a living by talking about veganism. That's very rare, and she is. You know, this is her full-time job. And I've had to say to her repeatedly, this is not my full-time job. I'm not a full-time YouTuber. So, you know, if you really want to hold me to these standards, because her excuse for denouncing me was that I didn't spend enough time addressing her idiotic video on the topic. I think if you add up the total number of minutes I've got on domestication of animals now, I don't know, it's a couple hours or something. So I think I did plenty of time. But I had to say, look, what do you want? I'm in school. I'm not like you. I'm not a full-time YouTuber. And again, unlike you, I've done other things with my life, like becoming a scholar of Buddhism. So whatever, that's where it's going to end with Swayze. And yeah, I mean, it would be a better world if people like Swayze and I could cooperate, something she never was interested in doing with me for whatever reason. I think she's always basically disliked me, and that's okay. She's allowed to. And it'd be a better world if I could cooperate with someone like Durianrider, too. I still think it's kind of sad and kind of lame, you know, even as bad as the whole background is. It would be a better world if he could put it aside and do something positive. You know, to save the planet and all that stuff, right?
Exactly, I know. No, the thing with Swayze is, like, I feel quite like let down by him as well, because I like made a video saying like my favorite YouTubers, and I do like some of her content. I think she's got great content, so I put her in it, and then like pretty much a week later she starts obviously doing this thing what she's done to you, which I think is completely wrong. I mean, like you say, she was digging up stuff from you on Buddhist forums from years ago just to try and make you look bad. I mean, that's not... I can't respect that of anyone. I mean, okay, I've been
Yeah, but it's cool that you noticed that. Most people don't even notice. Like, I mean, I know it's kind of crazy, but most people just think she did nothing wrong. And it's like, yeah, that's a significant question, right? Anyway, go on.
so many people just think she's done nothing wrong, and I mean, okay, I've used a few Durianrider videos and Freelee's videos from a couple of years ago, just to make funny videos of them and stuff. But the fact is, I'm not doing that to make them look bad. They've already made themselves look bad, and I'm just throwing in a few funny little things. But the fact is, she didn't have enough on you, and like, so she was going and just kind of finding things that could possibly make you look bad, and they're out of context. They're not even in the context, so people don't know what context this is in, and they're like, oh my god, that ISO guy is such a, they hate you because of it.
Well, look, they hate me. They hate me because Swayze tells them to hate me. I mean, that's the real thing. But anyway, go on. Yeah. What?
Exactly. No, sorry, I was finished there.
Okay, cool. No, I just say with all that stuff, like, I don't feel I have anything to be ashamed of. And again, like, you can read my essays on Buddhism. Some of them are very boring. Some of them are interesting. Like, I have one essay about vegetarianism in Buddhism. The history of that and why it's so misunderstood. It's not that interesting. It's a little bit interesting. But, like, for me, compared to these other people on the internet, like, do I feel I've wasted my life? No. I mean, compared to Durianrider, like, because Durianrider attacked me on the same shit, eh? Like, that's an irony Swayze may not get. Durianrider did exactly the same thing Swayze did. Durianrider was posting like, oh, look at this Buddhist forum where some people say that Eisel is like a bad scholar of Buddhism. It's like, yeah, well, guess what? I also delivered a lecture at Oxford University, England, at the invitation of a professor emeritus, recognizing my extraordinary scholarship in the field, despite the fact that I did not have a PhD. So, like, yes, some people on a forum say I'm an idiot, but there's some really considerable evidence out there that I'm not an idiot. But, like, when
they overlook all those things, though, don't they?
Well, no, like, the thing is, I don't care. I mean, like, in terms of my YouTube presence, my background as a scholar of Buddhism has nothing to do with it. Like, put it this way, nobody takes my opinion on veganism seriously because of my Buddhist scholarship. Like, they're just unrelated things. But, like, I would say for my own life, I do feel that it was a waste of my time. I do feel that I wasted 10 years of my life compared to what I could have accomplished. But it's this weird irony because it's like, well, if I'm comparing myself to Durianrider or Swayze, I feel what I did in those 10 years was really worthwhile. And I'm like, well, if you want me to be ashamed of what I did as a scholar of Buddhism, simultaneous with humanitarian work in Laos and Cambodia, simultaneous with all this other shit I did, don't you feel ashamed of living on permanent vacation, Durianrider? Or don't you feel ashamed, Swayze, of doing your kind of little softcore science show, like, with no real ambition? Like, because I would never bring that fight to you. I would never be going through Facebook trying to find some example of a comment where you're an asshole or something to defame you. But it's like, okay, if we're really going to take it that far, all right, maybe what I did with my life was dumb. Maybe I should have never moved to Laos or become a scholar of Buddhism. But I don't know, compared to you other losers on YouTube, it's not that bad, come on. So, no, it's,
Why do you feel like you wasted 10 years of your life?
Well, I mean, now I'm stuck learning Chinese at age 37 as a beginner. So, that's really not what I wanted to do. I mean, to give a long story short about it, Lauren, if you look at a map of Asia, what I decided to do was neither India nor China, but the area in between. So that includes Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and that the history and politics and everything else of that. And that was completely impossible for me to do, either as a career or even as a hobby. And partly, the fact that I'm a Canadian citizen makes it worse, but it mostly is just the failure of academia in those areas. There are no great universities anywhere, neither in Europe nor Canada nor Asia, where I could pursue that kind of thing, or even where it was also impossible for me to get a more humble job, and pursue that amount of time on the side, which I was totally willing to do. And I was also willing to become a Buddhist monk or, teach English or do all kinds of things. And, I got jobs working in museums and other funny things. I've done various peculiar jobs to feed myself. I was doing that kind of research. But no, it is a shame if you spend years and years working very hard to learn a language, and then all of a sudden you're never going to speak that language again. That is really harrowing. And you spend a lot of time studying politics and history of a given area, and then all of a sudden you're never gonna use that knowledge again. So to be cut off from that and to go through that repeatedly is pretty awful. And yeah, I mean, in sum, I'm now basically unemployable at age 37 and learning Chinese and getting another university degree, and my own future is uncertain at best. It's a very, very bleak outlook. And I have expertise in that area. Look, if I didn't have the YouTube channel, nobody in the world would care, which is also very sad in its way, right? Like, it's sad being on a university campus in Canada where I know more about Buddhism than the professor who teaches Buddhism. And I'm sorry, that's not a boast, it's just the truth. But nobody gives a fuck. You know...
Couldn't you become a professor in a university?
Well, no, I have videos about that, but basically that career path is really closed off to me. I had a couple videos called, like, Why I Don't Have a PhD. But no, that was impossible for me. And now at age 37, if I started on that path, when would I start earning money? At like age 50? You know, getting my first professorship? So no, but as I say, basically it was a failure of academia related to that part of the world. But the failure is in Europe, in Canada, but it's also within Asia. Like, it's just not the case that in Thailand or Myanmar I could go to university and get a PhD there. Nor Japan, China, or anywhere else. So there's been a lot of failure on the board. Anyway, sorry, that's just the answer to your question. Why do I feel that was a waste of my time? There are other parts. I mean, the other stuff you hear about on YouTube still is meaningful to me, and I don't think is a waste of my time, or not totally so. I knew a woman in Laos for 2 years. She knew me for 2 years. We spoke in both German and Lao, because I could speak German back then. I can still speak German to some extent. And, you know, she told me this unbelievable story about running away from American attack helicopters through the jungle, through the mountains, and, you know, a woman next to her being blown in half by the the machine gun fire from the helicopter. And that's not a joke. The helicopters have guns that can pierce steel. They're armor-piercing rounds at a big caliber. So they do. If one of them hits your body, it will tear you in half. It's not like a normal gun. And, you know, so some of that stuff, the humanitarian work and the human suffering and the first-person view of history, some of that stuff I can say is not a waste of my time. But no, I'm kind of burdened forever with a bunch of knowledge and skills that I never get to use. So, yeah, all the people who think I work for the CIA, why the hell would the CIA pay anyone to do the things that I did with more than 10 years of my life? What do you think the CIA does with their money, you know? I wish, boy. We're going to pay...
It's so funny, like, that people actually think that.
Yeah, the CIA is going to pay me to study Buddhism for 10 years, then get involved with First Nations, you know, Native people in Canada, then come on the internet and talk about veganism, you know, for 40 hours a week.
I know.
U.S. taxpayers' dollars at work, you know, that great stuff, yeah. Anyway, look, so Lauren, we haven't talked that much, but I think we should wrap up this conversation. But I mean, I know obviously you're in a period of transition. You know, you're transitioning out of the hospital, and eventually you're transitioning out of doing personal training too. But probably, you know, the next time I talk to you, probably, you know, you'll have questions about your own education, your own career in front of you, right?
Yes, I probably will, yeah. Like, I don't know, I mean, I might just try and kind of pursue what I'm doing at the moment in terms of, like, the whole vegan, I don't know, like, kind of maybe try and integrate the fitness style and health and mindset stuff into some sort of, because I have studied, like, some life coaching and things, but I don't know, because I don't want to be one of those people who, I mean, I think I've got a lot to offer, but I don't want to become one of those people who are just a bullshitter. I mean, I'm not. I'm totally not. But, like, you know, I don't want to become one of these permanent vacation people.
Yeah. Well, you know, I had a conversation like that with another vegan on YouTube who I will not name, or I'll give her a fake name. I'll say her name is Jill. Her name is not Jill. I was talking to Jill, and her channel, you know, so there's some kind of life advice and recipes and food and weight loss. So it's in this area. And we were talking, and I was assuming she'd get a real job while doing that kind of thing on YouTube part-time, and she was really assuming it would be her main career looking ahead. And one of the things I said to her was, look, Jill, you can't be better than Freelee without actually being better than Freelee. And what I meant by that, obviously we unpacked it in the conversation, but it's like, if you want to act like a nutritionist, you have to actually get a degree in nutritional science or one of those fields if you want to be better than Freelee, right? Because otherwise, you're exactly the same as Freelee. And, obviously, don't get me wrong. It's not hard to be better than Freelee in some ways. But it's like one of those things. It's like, well, we all have to live up to our hype. Like, if you're going to criticize Freelee for having fake credentials, which she does, to my knowledge, that was exposed by the press in Australia, that she lied about having this credential she doesn't have. Well, what about the rest of us? If we're going to do that, and if you personally are going to do that, I think it's probably not that hard in Scotland if you want to get some kind of nutrition science or health coach credential. And, it'll probably piss you off. You probably make a lot of videos complaining about how they teach you every day how healthy milk is or whatever. But if you're not willing to suffer through that, if you're not willing to write those exams, you can't, you know what I mean? You can't come on the internet and pretend you're better than Freelee. So it's the same for everything else. I mean, obviously the health and nutrition is one aspect of it, but there's so many ways in which we all have to ask ourselves that. And I've got kind of a list of videos I still need to make. I've got like 4 to upload now. My upload speed is really slow here, but one of the things I wanted to talk about with myself was that for me, it's really important that I talk in the first person, that I talk about me, instead of giving advice to my audience sometimes. Like, I've got this one video I've uploaded in many languages, translated again and again on Community. But like in that video, I don't say, this is what it means to be a real vegan, and if you don't do it, you're a fake vegan. That's what Freelee says. I say, this is what I want. This is what I want in my life. And a lot of people may not realize it, but there's a profound difference. Because I don't think everyone wants that. I don't think you have to want it. You know what I mean? I'm just talking about me. And I do think that's a difference. But obviously, for so many people, you do get into giving advice to others for what other people should do. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing evil about that. But then you've really got to think about, what is the difference between me and Freelee? What is the difference between me and Durianrider? Durianrider is there giving advice to 16-year-olds and 20-year-olds, and it blows my mind because I'm very reluctant to do that, but it's like, holy shit, I feel like the wise old man of the mountains, compared to Durianrider. But like a 16-year-old girl asks you for advice on her sex life, as that's a real example with Julia Bohr, is it your place to give that advice? Like on my YouTube channel, I talk about my sex life. I talk about my life, period. And it never enters into my mind that a 16-year-old would take that as like guidance or anything else, So yeah, that's my warning. And you don't get to be young twice. You don't. You fucked it up once and it's over. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that's unsympathetic, but sorry, I got 2 things to mention. But, within my own family, one of my grandmothers was a little bit like that. After her husband died, so she was alone, she just led this totally irresponsible life. Again, it's not evil, but she played tennis, she just had fun, she just did nothing. You know what I mean? She just lived a life of self-indulgence. And I really regarded that as immoral. Again, I may be a complete jerk. But, I kind of regard that with people like Joe Best or anything else also. It's like, well, look, this actually isn't your time to be a teenager. This is your time to be a grown-up. In his case, yeah, maybe he is old enough to be a grandparent. Maybe this is your time to have a grandfatherly role. But, that grandmother, she was never like a grandmother to me. She didn't even have responsibilities like that in my life. And, she also didn't have any kind of social or political or, any kind of interest in making the world a better place. So anyway, again, I'm probably a complete jerk to think that about my own grandmother, but that is how I think about her, and that's I'm also self-critical that way. I wish I could have a greater sense of responsibility for making the world a better place myself. But at the moment, I can't. And I hope learning Chinese is not a complete dead end. I hope this isn't a complete waste of my time. And look, and the other thing I was going to say, sorry, maybe we should close on this. We've been talking for well over an hour. But, the other day when I was on Vegan Cheetah's live broadcast, you've been on there. You've been on there more than I have. But
It's like it feels like home for me.
Right. Yeah. No, it's great. You guys are the odd couple, but it's great. Great you and Cheetah get along. But,
People are so trying to get us together. It's ridiculous. So it's so funny.
one of the things I said, because you look at the age group for who his viewers are, and they are young. I mean, almost without exception. Those people actually are the future of veganism. Actually. I'm not joking. And Durianrider and Freelee are not. Durianrider and Freelee are like 2012, which is already over. Joe Best is not. And it is really interesting to think, what is it like to be 15 years old today and watching Vegan Cheetah on YouTube? And of course, they also, to some extent, they watch me, they watch you, but whatever. Let's just take Cheetah as the example. They grow up thinking about veganism as something normal and as something important in a way totally different from how you and I ever thought about veganism, right? And 5 years from now, they're all going to be, 20, 25. They're all going to be 5 years older. And they're going to know who you are, and they're going to know who I am, and they're going to know who Cheetah is. And they're going to have a much more mature outlook on veganism because they already did all this immature stuff when they were 15. They didn't wait, like Joe Best waited till he was 40 or something. I don't know, right? He's doing this teenage stuff now, you know what I mean? So to me, that's something really kind of powerfully optimistic about the future. And I think it's something optimistic like for your future personally, as the vegan lass. Like, 5 years from now, you can go to some animal rights conference or event, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, and you'll meet people who grew up watching your channel. You'll meet people who say, hey, I discovered your channel 5 years ago when I just broke up with my boyfriend, whatever the story is. You're gonna meet people and have that contact with them. So ultimately, I don't say that because it's important as an ego trip. I actually think that's important for the future of veganism.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, great talking to you, lass. I'm going to stop now because otherwise we'll talk all night. Okay?
Yeah, I shall, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, wonderful to meet you at long last.
You know what I'm about.
À-bas-le-ciel.